Gustave Flaubert, Madame Bovary, scandalous affairs, frivolous fashions, secrets, debts, lies. Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary remains as relevant today as when it was first published in 1856. This 19th-century masterpiece, set in provincial France, delves into themes of infidelity, materialism, and the pursuit of happiness. Emma Bovary, the protagonist, is a beautiful and imaginative young woman who marries Charles, a kind but uninspiring country doctor. Disillusioned with her marriage and the mundane life in Yonville, Emma Bovary, raised on romantic novels, yearns for a more glamorous existence. She embarks on a series of reckless affairs and accumulates debt in a desperate attempt to escape her ordinary reality. Flaubert's vivid portrayal of Emma's struggle against societal constraints and her relentless pursuit of happiness captures the universal conflict between reality and desire. This novel, which scandalized readers upon its publication, continues to captivate literature enthusiasts today. Let's delve into the world of the Bovarys. The novel begins with Charles Bovary, Emma's ill-suited husband, introducing the titular heroine, or anti-heroine depending on one's perspective. The novel's action takes place over a relatively short period, focusing on the unhappy marriage between Emma and Charles Bovary. However, the opening chapters span a much longer time frame. We first encounter Charles Bovary as a clumsy schoolboy in a small French village. We follow him as he grows up, fails his medical exams, and eventually qualifies as a doctor. He endures a loveless marriage with the older widow, Héloïse de Buch, who is constantly scolding and nagging him. Despite her negative qualities, Héloïse brings one advantage: her wealth from her first marriage. One day, Charles is called to treat the injured leg of a local farmer, Rouel. Here, we encounter Emma for the first time, Rouel's daughter. However, we don't get to know much about her yet. Charles only glimpses Emma, but her beauty captivates him. He learns about her through local gossip, which suggests she dropped out of convent school, and through Héloïse, who believes Emma is pretentious. As Charles becomes increasingly infatuated with Emma, his marriage experiences dramatic revelations. He and Héloïse discover that her lawyer has swindled her out of most of her money. Shortly after, Charles discovers that Héloïse had lied about the extent of her husband's wealth. Shocked and humiliated, Héloïse falls ill and dies. This tragic event frees Charles to pursue his fascination with Emma. The two spend time getting to know each other through leisurely walks and conversations, with Emma being the more engaging and talkative partner. Charles soon decides to propose marriage. Rouel, who has mismanaged his farm and fallen into debt, is eager to see his daughter married off to the local doctor and readily agrees to the union. By this point in the story, we know Charles well, having spent significant time with him in the opening chapters. His meek, dull, stubborn, and provincial nature is evident. We, like Charles himself, are surprised by the improbability of someone as beautiful and vivacious as Emma marrying someone so ordinary. Unlike Charles, we sense that this union is unlikely to end happily. Despite Charles's lack of awareness, the marriage proceeds. Emma, ever the romantic, envisions a dramatic midnight wedding. The couple is eventually married in the afternoon at Emma's father's farm, a more respectable time. Charles is overjoyed by his good fortune, while Emma remains more detached. Even on the morning after the wedding, when Charles consummates their marriage, Emma remains cool and collected. As the novel progresses, we learn more about Emma, now Madame Bovary herself. While Charles is overwhelmed with love, Emma's enthusiasm is less pronounced. An avid reader of romance novels, Emma is disappointed to find her married life so different from the dramatic scenes she has admired in books. Flaubert writes, "Before marriage she thought herself in love, but since the happiness that should have followed failed to come, she must, she thought, have been mistaken." Emma seeks to understand the true meaning of bliss, passion, ecstasy, words that had seemed so enchanting in books. Dissatisfied with her provincial life, Emma longs for romance and excitement. One day, an invitation to a ball hosted by the Marquis d'Andervilliers fulfills her desire. Emma is captivated by the display of wealth and elegance, but also embarrassed by her husband. Surrounded by the upper class, Charles appears increasingly gauche to Emma. She dances with a dashing viscount, and later, as the Bovarys depart, she picks up a cigar box discarded from the viscount's carriage as a keepsake. After the ball, Emma's life seems even more dull and tedious. She longs to be part of the refined, glamorous world symbolized by the ball and the cigar box. However, two events disrupt Emma's plans. Charles accepts a new job in the town of Yonville, and Emma becomes pregnant. It seems her fate is sealed. Despite the move to Yonville, the Bovary's social status remains unchanged. Emma remains dissatisfied with her lot and continues to yearn for a more passionate way of life. Emma's discontent manifests in various ways. Emma becomes distant and irritable, and her spending habits escalate as she attempts to fill the void in her life with material possessions. She indulges in lavish home decor and the latest fashions, including gowns, gloves, and hats. In Yonville, Charles forms a connection with the local pharmacist, the pompous Monsieur Orme. When Emma is invited to dine with the pair, she anticipates a dull evening. However, she is pleasantly surprised to meet Orme's boarder, the young, handsome clerk named Léon Dupuis. Like Emma, Léon harbors romantic fantasies and is equally disenchanted with provincial life. Their mutual feelings for each other become evident, though they remain unspoken. Emma gives birth to a daughter, Berthe, but the child fails to bring her the fulfillment she seeks. Emma begins to resent Berthe, viewing her as another symbol of the mundane life she despises. Léon, frustrated by the unspoken tension between them and unable to act on his feelings, leaves Yonville to study law in Paris. Emma is heartbroken by his departure. Amidst her distress, she meets Monsieur Elhuros, a moneylender who has learned of Emma's reputation for excessive spending. Shortly after Léon's departure, Emma meets Rodolphe Boulanger, a wealthy and sophisticated landowner. Rodolphe quickly recognizes Emma's unhappiness and emotional vulnerability. He decides to seduce her, viewing her as an easy conquest. He begins courting her, playing on her romantic fantasies. Overwhelmed by her desires and desperate for excitement, Emma succumbs to Rodolphe's advances, and they begin a passionate affair. The affair becomes the central focus of Emma's life. Consumed by her illicit romance with Rodolphe, Emma neglects her duties as a wife and mother. They meet in secret, and Emma fantasizes about running away with him to start a new life. She takes out loans from the unscrupulous Monsieur Elhuros, using the money to buy Rodolphe extravagant gifts. Charles remains oblivious to her infidelity, and his obliviousness only fuels her contempt for him. Ironically, he even facilitates Emma's liaisons with Rodolphe. When Rodolphe invites her to go horse riding with him for her health, Emma initially demurs, but Charles encourages her to accept the invitation. It is during this horse ride that Emma and Rodolphe consummate their affair in a scene that was considered scandalous at the time. While Flaubert doesn't delve into explicit details, the heavy breathing and suggestive swoon convey the passionate nature of the encounter. For Emma, this encounter is transformative. Flaubert writes, "At last she was to know the pleasures of love, that fever of happiness which she had despaired of. She was entering something marvelous where everything would be passion, ecstasy, delirium." Unfortunately, her sentiments are one-sided. Rodolphe quickly tires of Emma's sentimentality but continues the affair due to her physical attraction. The affair reaches a climax when Emma and Rodolphe plan to elope. Emma remains convinced of their passionate love, only to be blindsided by a letter from Rodolphe filled with bland regrets just before their planned escape. The realization that Rodolphe was merely toying with her sends Emma into deep despair. Following the end of her affair with Rodolphe, Emma falls into a period of depression and illness. Charles, with good intentions, suggests a trip to the opera in nearby Rouen to lift her spirits. This fitting choice leads the novel to its operatically tragic climax. Mingling with the elegant opera-goers, Emma experiences a familiar sense of resentment towards her husband's provincial awkwardness. As she gazes through the crowd, she spots a familiar face. Léon Dupuis, who now lives in Paris, is visiting Rouen. The pair quickly rekindle their old romantic connection, and this time around they are not so chaste. Léon confesses his love for Emma. They kiss and arrange to meet outside the cathedral the next day. But Emma is stricken with guilt and brings to their reunion a letter stating the reasons why she cannot be Léon's mistress. They call for a carriage. In one of Flaubert's most provocative scenes, Emma and Léon ask their carriage driver to close the blinds and drive them around Rouen in a circle. Though the reader never witnesses what transpires within the carriage, a hand can be seen reaching through the window, scattering the torn remnants of Emma's letter onto the street. Soon, Emma begins making frequent visits to Rouen under the guise of taking piano lessons, where she meets with Leon for their clandestine rendezvous. Initially filled with passion and excitement, Emma's affair with Leon gradually becomes a source of disillusionment as the reality of their relationship fails to meet her idealized expectations. Like Rodolphe before him, Leon grows weary of Emma's emotional intensity and her escalating demands on his time. Meanwhile, the debts Emma has accrued with Monsieur Leroux become increasingly pressing. To appease the moneylender, Emma resorts to secretly selling portions of Charles's deceased father's estate. When Charles's mother discovers this deceit, she forces Charles to revoke his wife's power of attorney. However, Emma quickly manipulates Charles into reinstating her authority. Even with full control of Charles's estate, Emma remains unable to alleviate her mounting debt. One day, while Charles is absent, bailiffs arrive at the Bovary household to inventory their possessions, preparing to seize the property to satisfy Emma's outstanding debts. Desperate, she asks both Leon and Rodolphe for help. Both men refuse her. Emma, finally reaching Homerus' pharmacy, persuades Justin, Homerus' assistant, to open the locked cabinet containing the arsenic. Taking the poison, she returns home, leaving a letter for Charles, who has just arrived to find his wife ill and their belongings seized by bailiffs. Emma envisions a peaceful sleep followed by death, yet her romantic expectations are once again shattered. Emma's death, which occurs days later after a period of violent illness, reveals the extent of her debt to Charles. He discovers that she has sold much of his property and collected all outstanding patient fees to repay creditors, leaving him unable to settle their debts. Despite this, he remains devoted to her memory until he finds a bundle of letters in the attic detailing her affairs with Rodolphe and Leon. Charles, deeply disillusioned and impoverished, dies a broken man. Berthe, the Bovary's young daughter, is sent to live with Charles' mother. When she also dies, Berthe is placed with a poor relation of her grandmother and forced to work in a cotton mill. Emma's aristocratic dreams have not only failed to materialize but have condemned her daughter to a life of poverty. Madame Bovary centers on the conflict between romantic expectations and reality. Emma's life is shaped by her yearning for a reality that aligns with the romantic ideals she has gleaned from novels, operas, and plays. However, her disappointment sets in as reality inevitably falls short of these imagined ideals. The novel's provincial setting underscores the contrast between Emma's craving for passionate love, elegance, and excitement, and the ordinary realities of rural bourgeois life in 19th-century France. Flaubert goes beyond simply portraying Emma's disillusionment with reality. Her unrealistic expectations are explicitly linked to her downfall, destitution, and eventual suicide. While a less sympathetic writer might have turned Emma's story into a straightforward moral tale, cautioning readers against unrealistic romantic notions or aspirations beyond their class and station, Flaubert exhibits sensitivity and even sympathy for Emma's foolishness. As he famously stated, although Emma's actions undoubtedly lead to her downfall, the novel also expresses sympathy for her broader plight. As a woman navigating the limitations of 19th-century French society, Emma has few options in her pursuit of a fulfilled and passionate life. The expectation that Emma will find fulfillment solely through marriage and motherhood is challenged by Flaubert's unflinching portrayal of the Bovarys' unhappy marriage. Trapped in a loveless union and stifled by societal expectations, Emma seeks escape through love affairs and consumerism, only to find herself increasingly isolated and despairing. While her actions may not be wise, they are understandable when viewed against the backdrop of a deeply patriarchal society. Another recurring theme in the novel is consumption and its connection to class. Emma is constantly drawn to objects and experiences that she believes will elevate her above the drabness of her existence. Emma's desire for luxury, whether in the form of lavish furnishings, fashionable clothes, or romantic escapades, reflects the growing consumerism of her time. The novel was written during the Second Empire in France, a period characterized by the rise of the bourgeoisie, the expansion of consumer culture, and the decline of traditional values. However, Emma's unchecked consumption only entrenches her deeper in debt and misery, rather than allowing her to buy her way out of a dull middle-class existence. Flaubert's critique of the emergent consumer class she belonged to and the moral emptiness he saw in their pursuit of greater social standing through material consumption is evident in Emma's tragic ending. Despite its critical portrayal of the social and cultural mores of its time, it is not surprising that Madame Bovary faced significant controversy upon its initial publication. Flaubert was prosecuted for obscenity due to the novel's frank treatment of adultery, including several scenes that were extremely sexually suggestive for the time, and its perceived attack on the institution of marriage. Flaubert defended his work as a truthful portrayal of life, and the charges against him were eventually dropped. In the years since, his book has been recognized as one of the foundational works of modern European realism, thanks to its meticulous depictions of everyday life and its in-depth exploration of its characters, complex motivations, and emotions. Ultimately, it remains a powerful and enduring critique of romantic idealism, social and class constraints, and the human condition in modern society. In this Blink to Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, you've learned that Madame Bovary follows the story of Emma Bovary, a doctor's wife who, dissatisfied with her mundane provincial life and marriage, seeks fulfillment through extramarital affairs and excessive spending, ultimately leading to her tragic demise. The novel explores themes of romantic idealism versus reality and the emptiness of bourgeois society. Flaubert's incisive critique highlights the destructive consequences of pursuing unattainable desires and the constraints imposed by social expectations. Okay, that's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. Please take the time to leave us a comment and a like. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next Blink.